So, Kaiju, you're free. Why are you still here?
I've got nothing better to do at this point.
It feels like it's Stockholm Syndrome now.
Yeah. So, as we promised last time, we're going to be doing Stephen King. So,
Yay!
as we typically start off introductions, Kaiju being here kind of threw us off. So, I'm Advent Nebula.
I'm Cruellica Kain, married to Kaiju no Kami, unwillingly.
And I am the god of monsters, Kaiju no Kami, the greatest person of them all. I am amazing, stupendous, spectacular, outstanding, phenomenal. You will never find a better host than me, the almighty Kaiju no Kami.
I think his ego is broken.
I really think he's gotten here stuck so much that he's now figured out that he's free, but now he just has to let everyone see him for who he is.
As you can tell, I am a king. And we're going to be talking about another king who is almost as cool and kingly as me.
No, I'd say this king is a lot better than you.
Yeah, I have to agree. Yeah, sorry, I love you, honey, but this king actually makes quality work.
You know what? I can stop this recording right now and never release anything we've recorded, unless you do it yourself.
But I love you.
I don't care.
I love you.
Okay, congratulations.
We've been married for nearly 20 years.
Well,
Well, we've been together for nearly 20 years.
yeah, but that's not the point. The point is you can
20
do the...
years!
So?
20 years!
Congratulations. You want a prize for it?
Actually, yes, I do.
Yeah.
Here's a cup. It'll be your nightmare. For those that don't know, it's a Nightmare Before Christmas cup.
And why is he still here?
Because we wanted to make sure he got his point across for the Stephen King, but...
I kind of feel like now with him just pacing around the room that we're never going to get anything accomplished.
Well, let's just start talking about some of what we think are the best Stephen King adaptations so far.
Yes, this is pop culture therapy. I know you probably figured this out, but with Kaiju's monologue, I wasn't entirely sure. So we're
Monologue?
Yes, we're going to talk about all of the Stephen King works that have been adapted into film or television. Now, we're not going to talk about every single one of them because there's dozens upon dozens.
But there's some good.
There's only 24?
There's been 48 adaptations of Stephen King in the movies. There's been countless TV shows and miniseries for Stephen King, because that's how much of work he has had that has spanned since the 70s.
And that's how much of an impact he has also had on the horror genre.
With 48 movie adaptations and TV series, how many of them are actually good?
That's what we're going to be talking about first, because there's a lot of bad and ugly, but the ones that stand out as the good...
And are we sticking with just his horror ones, or even doing like the non-horror?
We're looking, basically, for Stephen King, even his non-horror ones still have an element of horror, be it psychological, or mystery thriller, or supernatural. So, while they're not true horror, they still have elements that could cross into the boundaries of horror. So we will look at his entire library, because I think it's important to give credit where credit is due, and then cry where we need to.
Yeah.
Ooh, that rhymes. So, let's start off with easy pickings.
I don't know that one.
Let's go with ugly.
Yeah.
No, easy pickings means like the low-hanging fruit type things. Ugly Stephen King adaptations.
Oh, Dreamcatcher. No doubt. Dreamcatcher.
Oh, yeah.
The worst.
Yeah.
The worst Stephen King movie I have ever seen. It's even worse than the new Pet Sematary remake that just came out. Yeah, Dreamcatcher. At least I wasn't completely bored through all of the new Pet Sematary. Through Dreamcatcher, I was so bored that the movie felt like it was longer than Lord of the Rings combined.
Little Dreamcatcher. I love the book.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the book for Dreamcatcher. And let me give a background on what the allegory of Dreamcatcher was. Stephen King had just finished his alcohol and drug rehab. at the time when he was writing Dreamcatcher, so a lot of it was allegory for what he was going through. But then the movie twisted it with butt parasites.
I was about to say, okay, let me also note, except for 3 books from Stephen King that we actually went through in the last year, I have never touched a single Stephen King book outside of these 3, so I don't have the mindset to compare them to the book. So if I say, oh, this movie sucks, I don't have any other reference to go by.
No, and that's a fair and valid point, because not everyone reads the books.
Being the Dreamcatcher was full of butt worms. I was just like, okay, so this is the story everyone was talking about. Okay, this is garbage.
So for me, what was the worst for me outside of Dreamcatcher is actually, I have to admit, the recent adaptation of Pet Sematary. Because while I hated Pet Sematary 2, I will have to admit, I have to compare it to the book, and I have to compare it to the original movie.
Yep.
Because while the original movie wasn't 100% accurate, you could tell, 1, that they actually read the book, and 2, that they appreciated what Stephen King was going for it. And Pet Sematary is a beautiful story about tragedy, about emotional manipulation coming from childhood to adulthood, and how you control that. Because the hardest part about that particular series is the mother went through a very traumatic childhood, which they touched upon in the remake horror movie, but they did it in such a terrible way. But they also switched up the death of the children.
Yeah.
Because that was what was most vital and impactful for the book and the movie.
Yeah, because, okay, for me, the remake, we had these random, like, there were like 2 flashbacks of this deformed sister.
Which is supposed to be so much more important than that.
That had nothing to do with the rest of the story. So the movie, I was like, what the hell is the point of this? This has no bearing on the plot. Then you had, there was all this talk from the old guy about a Wendigo. So I'm waiting the entire movie to see a frickin' Wendigo. And we never see the goddamn Wendigo.
Well, the other thing that they failed on with the remake is the Pet Sematary is, I know it's going to sound so typical to say this in horror, on an Indian burial ground.
You didn't tell us this was on an Indian burial ground! No, you didn't! Well, not by my recollection.
But nevertheless, because we just watched that Treehouse of Horror. But I think for that particular movie, there was so much Native American culture mixed into it that I really felt that was a slap in the face for the story, because that's what made it so impactful.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with one that came out the year I was born. And
so
it's probably one of the...
They had movies in the 1800s?
Oh,
shut
go
up.
the hell.
And it's probably one of the worst werewolf movies I've ever seen. Silver Bullet.
Oh,
never even
God.
heard of it.
Yeah.
Special effects are terrible. It's like they didn't even try. The story is only a half-hearted adaptation of the short story that this is based on. And the werewolf special effects are laughable. And when I watched this, I'm like, did they even read the short story, or did they just go, okay, we're just going to make a werewolf hunting story and end up doing this?
Well, it kind of reminds me of, when you're saying that, another really low or ugly is Graveyard Shift.
Sadly, I like that movie, but I can understand where a lot of people don't.
It was very loosely adapted from his actual book. And for me, I guess a little background is, when I was younger, my mother read a lot of slutty romance novels. She didn't want me reading those books because they were too adult. So the next option was her Stephen King collection, which apparently was okay. So I read so many Stephen King books as a child, And then getting to watch a lot of these movies, I became so particular. I understand why some people are so expectant on things to match the written work to movie, but I understand taking liberties.
Okay, being that we have gone through the books for It, Shining, and Doctor Sleep, I can say, well, Doctor Sleep was weirdly written, but Shining and It both were excellent, but there was so much fluff in those books that would not translate well into the movies.
Good thing you've never read Stand.
Like The Shining. The Shining has a scene in the book where Jack goes to a payphone to call the Overlook's owner to bitch him out, to tell him about this article he's writing, and then nothing comes out of it. It has nothing to do with the plot. That would be a waste of time in movies.
But in books, so you can have this fluff that actually
Same
can
with
be there.
Same with in It. There's a scene in the book where the bullies are just setting their farts on fire. That would not have any purpose in a movie.
But it did set up the bullies in the book when you think about it.
Well, no, because it was towards the end of the book. So it's not like it really had any impact on the overall plot.
All right. Any others that you would like to note?
For worst?
Yes.
What have I seen that what was the other one we saw that I thought was...
Well, while he's singing on that, I can't remember if it was late 90s or early 2000s, NBC TV remake of Firestarter. And you're laughing because you've seen it too, and know why I bring this up.
I've never seen either version.
A shot-for-shot remake of the film just like Psycho, but toned down for TV.
I just remember the only
Or
thing.
Drew Barrymore, she was like butchered.
Yeah.
I thought she was from the movie version.
She is, yeah. But her character being remade shot for shot just did not work.
Yeah.
Oh. But no, I don't know that one outside of... the only thing I know about Firestarter is a song from Prodigy.
Yeah.
And you're lucky there.
Yeah, the original Firestarter we'll bring up later.
The
but
only... Actually, I didn't see it. We didn't actually watch it, but the only thing notable to me was when we watched the Nostalgia Critic review of the one on the airplane where people disappeared, and then
the Langoliers.
you had the spinach-looking CG.
We watched Langoliers.
No, we didn't.
Yes, we did.
No, we didn't.
Yes, we did.
No, we didn't. We watched the Nostalgia Critic
I've
review.
seen. I
Okay,
swear
well,
I've watched it with you.
No, I've never seen it.
I've
outside.
seen Langoliers so many times.
I've only seen the Nostalgia Critic review of it.
And I will disagree with you, and we'll get to that
Later. Yep.
because I have to admittedly disagree with you wholeheartedly. But
Because
I can
that's one when we get into it, it's not about the monsters.
no. But I will say, okay, ugly. I will agree. The CGI was horrible.
They look like cabbage.
The CGI is horrible, but everything else story-wise, you need to watch it because you'd appreciate it for so much more.
Yeah, the monsters are not the point of the story.
No. So with that said, because we could go all day on ugly, because there's more.
Let's go into the bad adaptations, but still have some enjoyable elements.
Bad that we'd be willing to watch again, I guess is a really good way of putting it.
The TV version of it.
Yes,
I was gonna start
say
with
that.
The TV, being that I watched it for the first time last year after seeing the new movies. The TV version, like there were notable scenes, and then also when we went through the book, having scenes that were in that didn't make it to the new remake was cool. But I felt Tim Curry was lazy in that movie. I felt he didn't give it his all. I felt like he was just doing it just to collect a
But
paycheck.
every 90s kid who watched it
Has a clown fear nowadays.
will argue with you on that point. You're watching it as an adult. Think about all the kids, including myself and Advent,
But it wasn't
who
meant
watched.
to be seen by kids.
I
'cause it was-
understand, but trust me, we were typical examples of latchkey kids.
Yeah.
We watch many things that
I
we are
know,
never supposed
but
to
I'm
watch.
saying but the movie was not made for kids, so kids are supposed to be scared of it because it wasn't made for
I
kids.
understand, but when you have all these 90 kids who watched it, who are like, oh my god, Pennywise, Tim Curry was the pinnacle. Yes, Bill Skarsgård,
So much better.
so much
And I also
better.
think the other problem is, after hearing how great Tim Curry is for years on end, when we finally watched it last year, I was like, so this is the movie that everyone kept talking about Tim Curry's performance in? He's not even doing anything to really feel like Pennywise.
See, that's where, because you also watched the first It movie before seeing,
No, we watched both, because I didn't want to see
yes.
the miniseries till after, because I didn't want to have spoilers.
Yeah, so you saw both, so you had a very clear comparison where I have always just watched.
Until we got the new version.
Yes. But, yes, it is bad. It's so bad, it's good.
And I'm going to go with this one as a so bad it's good. Written by Stephen King, directed by Stephen King, and music by AC/DC. Maximum Overdrive.
I've only seen it through the Nostalgia Critic review.
Oh
my God. So what happens when you have a comet come to Earth that causes technology to start killing everybody?
It creates a Green Goblin face on a truck.
Yeah. Which, this movie, the acting's terrible.
Isn't that the one that Stephen King directed
Yes.
himself?
Yes.
Yes.
Where he was gloating and he
Yes.
was finally going to
Yes.
make a
Yep.
correct Stephen King adaptation?
And he, based on his own short story, he wrote the script himself and directed himself. Acting's terrible, but the concept and just the way things go is so over the top.
So is
it's
it-
so bad, it's good territory.
Is it explained why the truck has a Green Goblin face on it?
Nope.
No.
It's just a truck that has a Green Goblin face on the
Because
front.
I'm like, okay, was it a Marvel comic truck or was
No.
it...
So for me, one of the so bad it's good movies for Stephen King is the Tommyknockers. Tommyknockers
Don't know it.
simplistically is almost an allegory for what Stephen King was going through at that particular time, because it's about somebody who is an extreme alcoholic, they're a writer, they're a creative, and then you have all of these alien supernatural elements going on in the background. The book is phenomenal. The movie is not the greatest.
It's just one of those that you can't really translate that story very well to film. Animation could do it properly.
Yes, but it is still a good movie that you enjoy it because you're like, okay, I can get down with this. Another so bad it's good while you're looking real quick is The Shining,
Do you mean which one?
the miniseries.
The TV miniseries.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not bad. I like, well, I guess we should just talk about all the Shinings in there. Because obviously the Kubrick film is the greatest Stephen King adaptation ever. At least for horror movies. But I like Steven Weber as Jack Torrance. Because you really get to feel his mental breakdown of going from this troubled father to an insane maniac. Whereas Jack Nicholson is just Jack Nicholson playing Jack Torrance. Jack Nicholson playing Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance.
I have stuff up if you need to look at.
Well, I'm just trying to remember which of the miniseries it was that I was thinking of on here that was there, and I'm going to have to go with Sometimes They Come Back is one of those ones
yes.
that is just, I barely remember parts of it, but I remember if I watched it again, I'd be heckling it because of it was straight TV adaptation.
But, wait, are we talking about that or The Shining?
Sometimes they come back.
Okay, you're confusing me then.
Oh no, because we moved on.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know we were done with The Shining.
Oh, I thought you were because you.
Well, you
stopped.
didn't say anything about it. It was your pick.
Oh, I see. But with The Shining, the reason I like the miniseries, I don't like the miniseries is they change elements from the book, but they do it in such a fun way that you like it. But the CGI.
Oh, the topiary animals are bad.
Yeah.
And there are parts of that movie where nothing happens.
Well, that's
for,
the other thing. It's like static.
long periods of time of just nothing going on.
And I'm sorry, for me, Halloran, Scatman Carruthers is by far the pinnacle of what I see when I think of Dick Halloran.
Yep. I will say the Kubrick adaptation is the superior to the two, but Weber was better than Jack Nicholson.
That's
Yes.
the only thing I will say. Weber is what I think makes the that movie adaptation, that miniseries. But I will say, okay, so we've read the book, which I will say of the 3 Stephen King books, that is my favorite of the books. I like, though, the Kubrick version is horror with bits of drama. The book was a drama with bits of horror. So I can definitely see why people consider it inferior to the book, but I prefer Kubrick's psychological horror aspect to the entire story, because even though you didn't see Jack always drinking, you got the sense of
Yes.
of being an alcoholic. You got the sense that he's an abusive father and husband. But then also, I have to say, originally I thought Shelley Duvall was a terrible Wendy, but having gone through the book, Wendy's just a terribly written character all around.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. And what was the series you referenced?
Oh, let me go back to Sometimes They Come Back was probably my one that I barely remember it.
Sometimes They Come Back. That's the hard part for me as well, because it wasn't bad. I enjoyed it.
So what you're saying is that what it's about isn't coming back to you?
Pretty much, because I do remember it's one of those that it's going to be in that territory is so bad it's good, but it's probably because of the limitations of it airing on CBS in the early 90s.
Well, that's really
You know what
it.
was another bad adaptation?
Huh.
The Twilight Zone episode from the 80s of his story called Grandma.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that, once again, just like everything else, we can find a million.
Like the Carrie remake?
Yeah, that would be another Ugly.
Never seen any of them on that end either.
So, Ugly would definitely be the Carrie remake. But let's move on to good.
Yes, there are.
I want to start with one of my favorites for the good. And that is Creepshow.
Yes.
So, Creepshow and Creepshow 2.
Tales from the Crypt wannabe?
There's a lot like that, because I have a second one that's very similar. So with Creepshow and Creepshow 2, that was directed by George Romero, but with a lot of it written by Stephen King.